Welcome to Grow with Purpose. This is Axiom's podcast where we talk about the things that Axiom advisors are doing in the field every single week. We also get to talk to some of the business owners that they're doing it with. And today we have a business owner on the podcast, but she's not exactly a client. She is a colleague. So we have back for the second episode in a three-part series, JoAnna Kelso. So welcome, JoAnna.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So JoAnna is the president of Axis Outsourced Accounting, which is a sister company to Axiom. If you want to hear a little bit about how that got started, I don't know. Actually, we didn't cover it because I started with that last time, and then I screwed up and we had to go back. So I'll fill in the gap here. So Axis, Cameron Earhart, who's one of my colleagues here at Axiom, he came to me about a year and a half ago and said there's some clients that aren't quite ready for Axiom yet, but the thing that they have in common is that they don't have financial clarity around what's going on in the business. And really before if we got started today, that's the first thing that we'd have to tackle. And he said, I think there is a place for us because we can't find it anywhere else. And it wasn't because he hadn't tried. He had given a heroic effort to try to find people who could help these businesses. And for one reason or another, I think we kind of came to the conclusion that the business model is kind of broken for people who are doing this. And I'm not saying nobody's getting it right. Clearly, we are not reinventing the wheel. But we just didn't feel like things were working for our clients the way we wanted them to when we were pushing some of this stuff over to other people. So we said, you know what? If we're going to be held accountable, why don't we hold ourselves accountable? And so Cameron decided, or he came to me with this idea, and the two of us decided, let's do it. Let's go out and start a company that does this. And but we wanted to do it right, and it took us a year and a half. Maybe we did talk about this in the last episode. It took us a year and a half to find JoAnna, and so she's the president of that company, and she's building it out and building the team over there and onboarding clients. So we have finally somebody who knows more about accounting than I do, which is phenomenal. I cannot tell you how excited I am not to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to the financial clarity business owners need. And she's been working with business owners for a long time in this space for 30 years. So JoAnna, I want to pick your brain today on this outsourced accounting concept that Axis is firmly believes in. This the reason that we exist at Axis is not to be bookkeepers, but to be an outsourced accounting department. So why don't you talk about that for a second so the audience gets an idea of what's the difference between outsourced accounting and bookkeeping or even internal accounting?
Sure. Well, some business owners may have somebody in seat in their office that can do data entry, that can enter the transactions as they come through a bank feed or enter the credit card transactions, and they can reconcile things. And all throughout the year, things are reconciled. But when you deliver those financials to a CPA at the end of the year to file taxes, chances are there's going to be multiple hours spent cleaning those things up, making sure that things are actually accurate. And so that's going to cost you a lot at the end of the year because your CPA is going to have to do a job that should have been done all throughout the year. And then you're going to find that, just having a data entry person is not the same as having an accounting person. And we believe in outsourced accounting because you can partner with us, and then you have a knowledge base that you're not going to be able to just hire in-house. You're going to have a knowledge base that covers multiple industries, multiple years of experience. And we're going to be able to take your financials, make sure that they're clean and consistent on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. It's going to, in the long run, it's going to save you a lot of money, but it's going to save you a lot of frustration, a lot of time. So outsourced accounting really provides to you what one singular person in your office doing data entry could never provide for you. And maybe you have a really experienced person in your office, but those resources may be utilized elsewhere because we still are going to have a broader knowledge base. And we're also going to offer to you some consulting services with Axiom and things that you're not going to be able to get by having somebody in-house doing your base level bookkeeping.
Let's talk for a second about what I might call the skills gap
Yeah.
when you go, let's say you go look for your own person, and I'll just say this, like none of you are gonna be able to afford JoAnna on your payroll, right? Don't even try. Like because the wealth of experience and knowledge and working with business owners that she has access to, that comes at a price. You have a very high value in the market, but it's kind of like fractional CFO work, right? So you may not be able to afford somebody in that $200,000 space, but you can get access to $200,000 worth of knowledge for a fraction of the price because you don't need it full time. And you and I have
Right.
talked about this before, where oftentimes people get put in an accounting seat inside a business, and it may not be a full 40-hour week job.
Right.
Even if it is, what we find is that these are incredibly bright, incredibly conscientious people. They're detail oriented, and
Mm.
that's a skill set that has value in a lot of places. It has value
Right.
in maybe permitting is one I've seen before. So we're gonna let this person do permitting because, again, has to be very detail oriented. If we get it wrong, it gets a job held up.
Right.
Have to be conscientious because some of these are multi-stage permits, and there's a start permit, there's an in progress permit, there's a final inspection that has to be scheduled. So, oh, JoAnna's really good at making sure all the bills go out on time, so she'll be really good at making sure all the permitting gets done on time. And what happens is that over time, the permitting is incredibly urgent, right? It's got to
Mm-hmm.
get done, or lots of people start to make phone calls and get angry. And so, what is less urgent? Well, we paid the bills with the credit card. The vendors are paid, so we know that nothing's going to get turned off. But posting all those entries or making sure they hit the accounts so that we know how much we're going to owe on the credit card and where we've actually spent money, that can wait until tomorrow. Well, and tomorrow turns into next week, turns into next
Right.
month, and before you know it, we're 60 days behind in getting things trued up in our accounts. So that's just
Yeah.
kind of the nature of the beast. So one of the things that you get if you're outsourcing this function is access to a higher level of skill, but also you're precluded from requiring that skill base from doing anything other than what it's best at, where it's going to
Right.
deliver the most value to your business. So it's a choice that business owners have to make. Do I want the best in this particular area, or am I willing to settle for a lower skill set? And then am I willing to be my own worst enemy in terms of taking that limited skill set that I have purchased and invested in, and then applying it to areas where it's really not going to be doing the thing that I hired it to do, which seems
Right.
crazy, but it's
Right. It
again,
happens all the time.
it happens all the time. And I think
Mm.
if that were me, I mean that has happened to me before, right? So
Mm.
I'm guilty of the same thing. I just think it's comes with the territory.
Mhm.
What some of the other things that we might talk about are when you, let's say you decide to bring this internal, what are some of the other costs that you're paying, maybe just in terms of mental overhead when you add another person to your team?
Yeah, well, you are going to have to, manage that person, and you're going to have to build a relationship with a new person. And, when you first partner with somebody who is going to be doing your accounting, there's going to be a lot of questions and there's going to be a lot of time to build up trust. But, if you bring somebody in-house, they may not even know all of the questions that they need to ask you. And so you're going to be managing someone who is still trying to figure out things that, we as outsourced accounting, that we already have that knowledge base in place. We're going to be able to get some of these things handled without even having to come to you with questions. Whereas the person that's in-house doing that for you, they may not even have the questions to ask you. But, when you are talking about hiring somebody, the mental load of going through an interview process, of getting the person in, and then you may find a person that you really like, and then they accept a different position, and then you're starting all over again. And it happens over
Yeah.
and over again. So there is a true mental load to hiring somebody in-house and to managing that person, managing that position. And when you build up trust with somebody and then they move on, and then you have to build up trust with somebody else and then they move on. Whereas if you partner with a company like Axis Outsourced Accounting, you have the same partnership week over week, month over month. every year, and it's going to be the same relationship, same experience that you had from day one all the way through until you're ready to sell the business and move on.
Yeah, it's funny when you start to work with growing businesses, and this is the space that Axiom's been in for 20 years now. You're not always, but there are definitely periods where you're growing headcount,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly we've come through in the last 2 years this COVID boom in Southwest Florida, where a lot of our clients are located, and even clients outside the area benefited from this, where there was just a tremendous insourcing of resources. So more companies purchasing from here locally, obviously the building boom and all the services related to that. And you get into a mode of throwing people at problems and just to keep up with the growth.
Yeah.
But sometimes the people become the problem. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I
Right.
mean it as a leader who really appreciates that the people are what drive your business. They are the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that distinguishes you from your competitor across the street. It's the people that deliver the service or the product that are going to be able to
Yes.
make the difference for you. So they're very,
Yeah.
very important. But the same value they can bring, they can also, that can turn against you in the terms of conflict between employees. And I'll just
Mhm.
say, like, this may be unpopular. I might get in trouble for this, but I can say it because I am one. I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
Right? That's how my formal training was accounting, CPA, all that stuff. So I've worked with a lot of accountants, and I oftentimes am the one who gets pulled in, even if it's not, I don't do a lot of client work anymore, but our advisors will have issues in accounting departments. And one of the values of working with the Axiom team is we all kind of have our own individual areas of specialization. And mine being what it is, I'll get pulled in, and I work with controllers, and I work with staff accountants, and I work with outside bookkeepers. And I'll just say, they're not always the easiest people to get along with.
No.
They tend to be, unfortunately,
Territorial.
they're territorial.
Yep.
They can rub people the wrong way, oftentimes for very good reasons, right? They're trying to bring a higher level of accountability.
Right.
They do see things as black and white because there's no gray in balancing a balance sheet,
That's
or
right.
in reconciling a bank statement. So they have to be that way to be good at their job. But sometimes I talk to a lot of business owners who are very frustrated with the new hire they made in the accounting department. And sometimes, we've had the privilege in the recruiting side of what Axiom does to place some controllers and some CFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first thing that we interview for. We can figure out competency a lot of times from their CV, the resume. But what we can't find out is whether they're going to play nice with others. And so
Yeah.
just being able to eliminate that potential headache for business owners and say, if you outsource this, it's one less person on your team that you have to manage. Not that people shouldn't be the reason that you get up in the morning and the reason you love to be a business owner. But if you can just focus your time, effort, and energy on the people who are getting the work done and
Yeah.
the people who are helping understand what's happening with that work getting done, if that can be somebody else's, if that could be JoAnna's headache, because JoAnna's
Mm-hmm.
going to manage that, then you have more bandwidth. And I think that's something that we should talk about more often, because I think
Yeah.
we underappreciate what adding just one person to the org chart means for the business owner. Because the other thing is that the positions we're talking about often report directly to the business owner.
Right.
It's not just one more person on the org chart. It's one more person that you're directly responsible for on the org chart.
Right.
So
And
limiting it.
accountants often, we're walking a fine line, and we're trying to play a balancing act because we do fulfill the role of advisor. But then when we advise the business owner a certain way, and then the business owner goes a different direction, you have to really step back from that and say, this is not a personal attack. The business owner just went a different direction. But it's very difficult when you're in seat, in-house bookkeeping, and the business owner has a different idea of how to run the business than you because he's been doing it or she's been doing it for a very long time. It's very difficult as an in-house bookkeeper to step back and say, I'm just going to move on from this and I'm going to continue doing a good job. So there's a lot of nuances to the relationship when you have somebody in-house that you do not have to worry about when you outsource that.
Yeah, I think about it sometimes. Like we have quite a few clients that have like distributor relationships. So whether they're installing air conditioners or roofing materials or even insurance agencies that deal with carriers, like they outsource the entire fulfillment of a role that's critical to their infrastructure. Like if they were sourcing their own products, then they've got to get on the phone with 4 or 5 different manufacturers or 20 different manufacturers. They've got to manage inventory schedules way upstream so that they can have the product tomorrow if they want it. And if we were to propose to them, hey, why don't you insource this because we think you could save a lot of money, they would say, Joey, I think maybe the math makes sense, but the reality doesn't make sense, because what you're not considering is the cost of what managing that whole process is going to take away from my ability to spend time where it's really going to make a difference in the business. And if we can say, and this is where I like to pause for a second and say, if you're talking about hiring a bookkeeper, all right, so maybe a freelancer, and you say it's not a full-time position, I'm just going to hire this outside person. Well, you're still going to have to manage everything that person is responsible for, that needs for their job. Essentially, you're going to have to make sure that they get their licensing for the software. You're going to make sure that they get set up in the email system. You're going to have to because they're not going to have a lot of that stuff. Maybe they do, but you're like, well, it really doesn't look good to have them emailing customers about outstanding receivables from their AOL.com email address. So I've got to get with my IT company and get them set up, and then I got to make sure that they can remote in, and I got to send the IT company out there to make sure they have the right kind of security. And even though you think that you've eliminated headaches by just hiring an outside person, you haven't outsourced. You just hired an outside person.
Right.
So if you said, what if I could let's take another department, let's say sales. What if I could outsource my sales department? What would that look like? I have one company president that is responsible for delivering on that relationship. And I don't have to deal with prima donna salespeople. I don't have to deal with them bucking the process and filling out paperwork. I don't have to deal with, all the headaches that I put up with, because they generate the revenue for my business. What if I just got the revenue generation portion of my business without the headache of having to manage that department? That's kind of how we want businesses to look at the potential of outsourcing their accounting, is you get the benefit of delivering on the value that department is supposed to deliver without all of the time constraints on your schedule and the emotional and mental headaches that come with it.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that sometimes business owners face a big hurdle when they're talking about their accounting department in general, because they have the mindset of, I just need somebody to get the data entry done. And the value add of a trusted accounting partner is not immediate. There's not a revenue spike. There's not a reduction of expenses. There's none of that. But then you look back 2 years down the road and you're like, wow, those strategic decisions that I made because I had a trusted advisor have greatly increased the value of my business. And I say that greatly increase the value of your business confidently, because if you do have a trusted advisor that you are working with, then 2 years down the road, you're going to be able to look back and say, I made more strategic decisions, and I actually did have large value added to my business because I outsourced to the right person, to the right company, and had this handled for me. So, we're not going to promise a revenue spike immediately or a reduction of cost or that type of thing, but we do confidently say that you're going to be able to look back and find that turning point of your business where you were able to focus on the things that are important to you, and you don't have to worry anymore about hiring somebody in seat because you outsourced the right position to the right place.
Well said. When we talk about painting the picture for what an outsourced relationship looks like, speak to, let's go back to the previous example, and you're like, well, outsourcing sales, a little bit different from outsourcing accounting. I could never outsource sales because I get weekly lead reports and weekly performance against target and weekly closing ratios from my sales manager. And if you're talking about the same thing I get when I get financials once a month, that's not going to work. I got to have that information, and I'm kind of pitching you a softball question because
Yeah.
this is one of the basic premises that we said we're not going to build Axis Outsourced Accounting the same way the industry typically looks at this on a monthly cycle. But speak to that for just a second.
Sure. Well, there's two things that I thought of when you were talking about that. One, we did build this differently. We are going to provide weekly financial dashboards to business owners. They can log in, they can see at a glance what their accounts payable is looking like, what their accounts receivable number is. They can click into a P&L that's updated weekly. We are going to make sure that the numbers that you are looking at are the true and accurate representation of your business. If you had to mid-June run to the bank and take them some financials, you could confidently take them year-to-date financials, not just up through prior month. You could actually take them year-to-date financials, and we're going to stand by that. So we are going to provide those weekly financials. But the other thing to consider when you're talking about outsourced accounting is 99% of the time, the business owner is very fluent in their sales numbers. They're very fluent in vendor relations or customer relations or whatever they do to actually grow their business. What they're not fluent is accounting. And so they're trying to manage this person that they really don't know what to even tell this person. They don't know what questions to ask their outsourced or their in-house accounting person. They don't even know how to see if the accounting person is actually doing a great job until they get to the end of the year. And then the CPA is like, hey, we're going to clean up, 11 out of your 12 months. They don't really even know. Whereas if you can outsource, especially with Axis Outsourced Accounting, I will confidently say we're going to keep your business books clean, consistent all the way through the year. And you can trust at any time when you look at your dashboard, when you look at your financials, that you're getting good numbers. And you don't have to worry about wondering if you are getting the accurate financials. You're going to know with confidence that you're looking at the right numbers.
When we talk about the outsourcing relationship too, one of the things we should talk about is just the decisions that get made with, when you're outsourcing this relationship, because that's their responsibility that you may never know about. And maybe you could touch on some of those from like the people who are doing the work and their competency, the software and the tools that are being used. You don't have to find them office space. That's our problem, right? So
Right.
what are some of the things that business owners may never see, but whether they're outsourcing accounting or some other critical function in the business, like they need to have an appreciation for these so that they can evaluate the decisions between different providers well.
Absolutely. Well, if with Access Outsourced Accounting, one thing that we are very passionate about is making sure that your books are touched weekly and that they're updated weekly. Because if you wait until a close cycle, you're 45 days away from if we were talking about closing out June right now, you're more than 45 days away from June 1st. And so you're not even going to have accurate information for more than 45 days, as well as you're not going to remember what you need to tell your bookkeeper from 45 days ago. But the other thing that we're going to be really passionate about is making sure that everything is consistent from month to month. So if you want to look, maybe you're having an appointment with Axiom and Axiom is going to try and advise you on your marketing budget. Well, from January through June, things have not been categorized consistently. And so we can't actually tell you what you have spent on marketing from January through June. Now, your bottom line stayed the same because those expenses were categorized, but they weren't categorized consistently. And so we're going to make sure that you're looking at your profit and loss and you're making strategic decisions about where to spend your money, where to cut back, because you're going to actually have accurate, consistent categorization. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Well, when we talk about tools too, some of the stuff that you have brought to my attention that you're putting to use in Axis, frankly, just did not exist. Maybe even 5 or 10 years ago. And I was joking. We had a team call the other day, and I was joking. part of this makes me really angry because I'm like, this is way way too easy for you guys now, because the
Yes.
technology is pretty fascinating. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it
Yeah.
doesn't. But is there anything you'd say to that I would say the stuff that you're employing is truly cutting edge, and I'm
Yes.
not sure that even internal accounting departments are leveraging things like this to
No.
they're not even using them at all, much less to the fullest extent possible.
Right. Yeah, we are using all the technology partners that are available to us, and one of them that we are going to use for communication with our clients. There, it's going to send you questions on a weekly basis. These are the things that we were not able to categorize on our own, or we want you to speak to it before we categorize it. And it's going to come to you in a link in your email. It's very, very simple to use. You're going to have a couple of clicks and be done with it. It's not going to be a spreadsheet sent to you, and then you have to download it and enter information and then send the spreadsheet back to us. We're also leveraging that same tool that if you introduce a new vendor into the system, we're going to automatically start collecting your W-9 information. So that way, when it's time to do 1099s at the end of the year, there is no scramble. There is no famous 1099 scramble that happens every January 29th
Yeah.
as people are trying to get 1099s out before January 31st. So we're going to leverage all of those tools, and we're constantly going to monitor the market to make sure that we're using the most cutting edge technology. But we're doing that seamlessly behind the scenes. All you see is just the ease of communicating with us and the ease of getting your books done. But we're keeping it cutting edge, and I'm super excited about it. I bubble over during our meetings when I'm explaining about some of the technology that we're using, and y'all are sometimes going to have to tell me, "Okay, we're done, stop talking about it." But it is very exciting, and it's great to be with a company that understands that leveraging technology is of a real value add to the clients.
Well, what was it the case that you made, and this is kind of behind the curtain, but the case that you made to us for the tools that you had selected and were onboarding wasn't this makes my life easier. It was like, this is what clients want. They do not want to answer a 4-paragraph email, or like you said, download a spreadsheet, make edits, attach it, send it back. It has to be point and click. Is this something that they can do in their normal course of just processing email, rather than a major project that has to be set aside? And I think the benefit we've talked about what you get in terms of skill set and overqualified skill set when you're outsourcing. And this should be your expectation for anything that you're outsourcing, much less accounting. But you're getting access to people who are overqualified to be doing the work that you're doing for them. But in that, and you talked, I think maybe the last episode that we did together, you talked about there's an onboarding period, and it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to get everything humming. But one of the things that's happening in those first 3 to 4 weeks, and even the couple months thereafter, is that all this feedback, that as easy as we make it, is point and click, 15 seconds to get this information back so we can keep moving on your books and you have accurate numbers this week. It does require a little bit of a lift early on, but as time goes by, you're feeding the advisor on the other side of that point and click the intel that they need, so that question never comes back to you again.
Exactly.
And the technology, it's just leveraging the technology. The thing I've come to really appreciate about your approach to putting these tools into practice is not the whiz bang. It's always what's the value add on the client side for this? Is that can we make a case that it's going to make their life easier? Because frankly, they shouldn't be the ones having to make decisions about where to categorize things. So that's one of the things I'll give you the mission moment early. We have mission moments on Monday, but that's definitely a mission moment from the last week, where JoAnna's been talking about a tool, and I was like, wow, this isn't about making her life easier. This is about making it easier for the person who's hired us to do the work. One last thing.
That comes from years of listening to clients, them saying, I don't have time. I'm doing this in my truck while I'm waiting to go to the next appointment. I can't download a spreadsheet right now. Whereas the tools that we're leveraging, literally, you can be on your phone, pulled over safely, side of the road, and you can get things answered for us. And that's what we want to do for you.
That's awesome. The last thing I want to talk about is something that has come up for two clients recently that we've been talking to, and we've made this case, and you see, like, it's almost like the ray of sunshine come down through the clouds. You know, the angels are singing, and it's been when you've been talking about all these conversations that you have to have with people outside your four walls that have direct bearing on the accounts. Like, it's not about selling the job, but once the job is sold, it's about the payment terms or the payment method or the invoice, the payment that's now due. Or when you talk about the vendor side, it's about, hey, the bill of lading or the invoice from the vendor didn't have the job cost information on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to worry about that. We can have those conversations for you. And you just see the shoulders on the other side just relax, and you start to see them with this glimmer of, what am I going to be able to do with those 10 to 15 hours of back and forth voicemails and emails, and that you're going to do that for me? So maybe I've said too much about it, but speak to that for a second. And in the relation of, like, that's something that if you had a full blown out accounting department inside your company, that would be the expectation. I shouldn't be having to call people about invoices. Right. I shouldn't be having to call vendors to resend a bill. But this is something that, regardless of the size of your business, you can have access to that. And I would make the case that it's even more important the smaller your business is, because you can't afford to be spending time doing that.
Right. Well, and if you are a small business and you start out by doing all of those tasks yourself, and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's only actually taken me an hour here or there, it's no big deal. But then your business grows, and then it's taking you more time, and it's taking you more time, and you don't even realize how much of your time it's taking. More importantly, you don't realize how much brain space it has taken from you. I just posted a blog on our website talking about the importance of white space in a calendar and just taking some time to actually think about your business. And if you don't have any of that time, because every time you think about your business, it's not, how can I grow? How can I earn the trust of my customers? How can I move this forward? It is, oh, did I call about that invoice? Did I call this customer to get payment? Did I call this? If you're only thinking about the tasks of your business and not how to grow your business, then you haven't gotten the right person in seat. And if you outsource that to us, we're going to take those tasks off of your plate. And all you have to do is just start thinking about growing your business. And there's going to be some higher leverage things. I'm never going to call a customer and sell them your product. That's Right. That's not what you hired me for. What you hired me for is to make sure that your suppliers are paid, so that way you can sell your product. Right. So we're going to take those things off your plate so you can focus on what you started a business for, was to be successful, to grow, to have something to pass to your kids, or to sell it so that way you can enjoy the retirement years. We're going to help you get to where you envisioned you were going to be whenever you started your business.
Well, and I'll say, I mean, I will speak from a business owner standpoint, and I'm sure you can too, the level of anxiety that rises up in a business owner when you start talking about somebody's going to speak to my customers or somebody's going to speak to my trusted suppliers that's not me, and how is that person going to be treated. And I'll say again, you know, it took us 1.5 years to find the person that's capable of building a team and building that accounting emotional intelligence into everything that they do, so that the business owner doesn't have to worry about that. They would actually rather have you and your team calling that customer, calling that vendor, because they know you guys are going to be able to treat them better than they would, knowing that that thing that they asked for on the invoice regarding job costing still isn't there, or the customer hasn't paid, you know, and we have a whole process around receivables that's incredibly high touch, and the whole purpose is there. I learned that process probably 10 years ago, and it's there to deepen the relationship with clients. You have an incredible opportunity when it comes to receivables management to build loyalty and trust and understanding and empathy with your customer base. And if you're not taking advantage of that, you're missing out on a competitive advantage. So I think that just it speaks to the way that you do what you do on this incredibly technical side of the business, that still every single aspect of it touches people. And if you miss that part, then you're going to be so much less effective. I mean, your accounting department should be a competitive advantage in your business. And if you're outsourcing it, it should be a competitive advantage on steroids.
Yeah. Well, and we're also going to be equipped while we're on the call with that customer. If the customer says, "Oh yeah, I meant to pay that. Let me pay you real fast." I'm going to have the ACH already ready, or I'm going to have the credit card system already pulled up. I'm going to take that from you. Whereas you may have to be like, "Oh, let me call. I can't remember how to do an ACH, or I can't remember how to."
Right.
We're going to have all of those tools at the ready, so we're going to take care of it. So the relationship that the customer is going to feel is somebody that's on top of it, that is driving the business forward. So you're going to know that we're handling it in a professional manner, and that we are treating them the way that we want to be treated, and that relationship is going to be sound.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we have one more conversation coming up. So if you've tuned into this and you didn't hear go back and listen to the previous episode, because we talked about some different topics related to outsourced accounting and clean financials in particular, and what that means for business. But we have one more conversation to go, which I get more excited every time we talk. So we're going to have the next conversation. But if you're listening to Grow with Purpose podcast, we definitely want you to subscribe. We would love for you to review us, because that's the way that more people hear about us and get to be exposed to conversations like this one and people like JoAnna. There's a leadership guide that you can download from the show notes of this podcast. I would also encourage you to go to the website for the podcast and subscribe to that leadership guide. It will show up in your inbox every time we release an episode. It'll remind you, hey, there's a new episode of Grow with Purpose out there, so that you can go listen to it. But it's also going to give you kind of an overview in just a few pages of what was covered, links to things that we talked about, resources that you can start to use with your team immediately that are going to help your business grow with purpose. So thank you, JoAnna, for being here. Love spending time with you and just being a part of everything you're creating at Axis. I'm super happy to have you at the head of that company, and can't wait to see what's ahead.
I enjoyed talking with you. Thanks so much.